implicated by all that happens in the world of technology, and to discuss how do we manage the goods and the bads that are associated to this dynamic sector. We have a very, very strong and eminent panel. To my immediate right, Zunaid Ahmed Palak MP, Minister of State for ICT Division. To his right is Anki Das, who heads Facebook for India, South Asia, and Central Asia. Damian Mapa, to her right, will be discussing his experience in Philippines and in the sector of privacy, in the pursuit of privacy. And finally, and not the least, we have Ambassador Amandeep Gill, who was India's permanent rep to Geneva. He was then member of the high-level panel of the Secretary General of the United Nations and is now engaged on creating digital health through AI research collaboration. So thank you very much for joining us. I am going to start with Minister Palak. And I'm going to ask him to, by way of opening remarks, outline the vision for digital Bangladesh as it pertains to the three imperatives of economic growth and inclusion, peace and security, and of course, rights and privacy for the individual. And how does digital Bangladesh try and balance these three competing imperatives sometimes?
Thank you, Samir, for having me here, and our eminent panelists, dear guests, friends from media, good afternoon to you all. So first of all, I just want to share with you when Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina declared her vision to build digital Bangladesh on that time, 10 years back, how was the scenario in the digital space in Bangladesh? On that time, only 5 million internet users were there, and there were no ICT industry at all. Connectivity was so poor, only 2G was available, and outside of Dhaka, there were no NTTN's presence. So from that scenario, we have came a long way to achieve digital Bangladesh vision. Now we have near about 100 million internet users and 160 million mobile SIM card subscriptions, and also we have been able to export $1 billion in ICT sector. So, and also we have been able to employ 1 million jobs in ICT sector. How it happened? Because Honorable Prime Minister declared her vision to build digital Bangladesh, and she focused on the youth, because we are enjoying the demographic dividend. 70% of our youth, of our population who are below 35. And under the supervision and proper guidance of our youth leader, who is the architect of digital Bangladesh, our young, dynamic, and talented leader, the Honorable Advisor to PM, Mr. Shajib, was a joy. He actually gave us the vision and the master plan and roadmap how we can get all these services online, how we can develop our human resources in ICT field, because we are developing 4 pillars to achieve digital Bangladesh. That is the core ideas for achieving the digital Bangladesh vision: human resource development, ICT industry, internet for all, and e-governance. So we have been able to set up 5,765 digital delivery centers across the country. So today is the day we are celebrating 9 years of establishing our Union Digital Centers. 10 years back, on this day, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina established this unique service delivery center, and she took the bottom-up approach. And that is why we have been able to available our 600 digital services online, and we have set up our own data center. When you are talking about the data privacy and data protection, so we have that capacity to store our own data, all of our government services we are hosting at our government data center. And we have been able to enact and approved our Digital Security Act last year. And under the Digital Security Act, we have been able to establish our Digital Security Agency, Computer Incident Response Team. Under the Digital Security Act, we are awareing our people how to make them safe and secure in digital space. But at the same time, we are very, very sincere and serious about their data privacy and data protection. Because we believe that we need to encourage our people to use internet. They should utilize this digital technology to get all the government services at their doorstep, at their fingertips. But at the same time, government should protect citizens' data. And that is why under the Digital Security Act, we are securing our citizens' data. We are protecting their privacy right. And we are also collaborating with our neighboring countries and the international organizations and platforms, how we can secure and how we can be capable to protect our digital space. So this is how we are balancing, we are utilizing the digital technologies for better use for the citizens. At the same time, we are securing our digital space.
So let me ask you one more aspect, since you've mentioned the word security, and you've also identified privacy as one of your fundamental objectives of the Act. How are you responding to the phenomenon where people are getting extremely radicalized online? You know, you're seeing violence and radicalization that is, and it's not a challenge for Bangladesh, it's a global challenge which requires global action. How is Bangladesh protecting itself from making sure its young population does not fall prey to this tendency that we are witnessing around the world? And where I come from, we are facing the similar challenge. And no one has yet discovered the silver bullet. How is Bangladesh attempting to respond to this challenge?
First of all, we believe in secular society. That is our main principle. And Honorable Prime Minister always encouraging our young students and teachers to censor about these terrorist activities. And after the Holy Artisan incident, and in last 2 years, we have been able to very active against the terrorist activities. And Honorable Prime Minister organized digital public meetings. Millions of people joined on that online digital meeting, and Honorable Prime Minister personally, directly, she talked with the teachers, the imams, and the students, and the parents directly, and she actually tried to make them understand that we should protect ourselves from these terrorist activities for achieving our economic growth and our digital Bangladesh vision. And that is how Honorable Prime Minister inspired us to act against the terrorist activities and this kind of online awareness program, and also in our 170,000 educational institutions, our education ministry, ICT ministry, local government ministries, they work together as a team. And also we worked with law enforcing agencies, because we are imposing strong laws, and we are taking under the justice all the criminals. But at the same time, we are focusing on how we can aware our future generation to protect them from all these terrorist activities.
I think that's a very remarkable effort, and I think something we should be sharing with the much broader South Asian region as a way of responding to, engaging with the youth, with schools and teachers, with madrasas and
Yes.
and religious leaders. I think that's a community, whole of community approach to response. Anki, let me come to you on this. In a sense, like I mentioned, this is not a national challenge. Of course, it implicates nations and it affects national security, but this is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
Now, global enterprises such as the one that you have worked with for a long time have to come up with something more robust and creative, right? How do you ensure that regions, communities, enterprises, countries, and communities are eventually on the same side when we tackle it?
So let me try and respond to you, Samir, in two ways. One, of course, taking off from where Honorable Minister talked about in terms of how do you deal with radicalization in society, and we've seen some very drastic consequences of that. I do want to talk about what are the kind of the global norms and also the practices which the global US tech industry is taking in this particular direction. And specifically also with regard to Bangladesh, I do want to share about certain things which we have been doing. So if you look at Facebook, the Facebook platform group of companies, what we've been doing is that we essentially have a 3 E's policy, which is essentially enforcement, second is education, and the last E is essentially figuring out ways in terms of looking at smart regulation, right? So these are the 3 areas that we are applying ourselves to in this particular area. If you look at counter-terrorism and our efforts in that direction, we have set up this global platform, which is GIFCT, Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism.
Which we are hosting in Delhi
Which we are
next
hosting
week.
in Delhi next week, as you're aware, and it's a South Asia forum. So there will be many people from this region who will be participating in that. Sort of participant members in that includes a lot of US tech firms. Twitter, Google, Instagram, everybody is a member of that particular group where they are sharing hashes of terrorist content, which gets taken down even before, they go viral. We ourselves have taken, just this half, we've taken down more than 12 million pieces of terrorist content before, anyone saw it. So the AI tools are developing well, which are getting applied. There's a lot more sharing and incident sharing protocols which are being activated amongst these tech firms so that this kind of material does not go viral. Recently, Dropbox also joined the GIFCT as a platform. So you're seeing that there's this general recognition that at a technology level, at a platform enforcement level, there are things which we can do so that this type of material does not go viral online. The second element is really the education aspect and what can we do together in terms of creating an environment of counter-speech, counter-narratives. So working with the minister and officials in his ministry as well as UNDP, we started this contest, a digital khichdi, which essentially means that how do you develop a tolerant society? Getting entries from participating students in colleges to create bite-sized content which can go viral, and this essentially is a contest. But this at least starts a conversation in society that what is the kind of society we want, what are the counter-narratives which we want out there. The third element is really, what is the kind of regulation which needs to be there at a scalable global level in terms of shaping norms. And there, I think, there is general recognition that intermediary liability laws, legislation, the notice and takedown provisions, when it comes to terrorist content, there's a whole lot of proactive stuff which industry is already doing, and this is a evolution. There's a lot more which we want to talk to governments about, talk to civil society actors about, researchers, because I don't think so everything is known in this particular domain. There's a lot of things in terms of how do terrorist organizations recruit, how do they change their identity, like AQIS today will turn into something else tomorrow. How do we look at detection? Those are the kind of things where research will be very useful. So it really is multi-stakeholder in terms of looking at all of this. But to come back to your point in terms of how can you create norms which is more scalable across a range of countries, look, in terms of content regulation, we've already gone on record saying, as a company, we've gone on record saying that this is an area of smart regulation, and we have to work together collectively with governments and with civil society in terms of designing such formats of content regulation.
So, Auntie, let me ask you here. Your title says Public Policy Director, Facebook, India, South and Central Asia. That's a vast geography. Now, do you see harmonization of norms or regulations in your own beat?
Yes, we do. So for instance, if you look at intermediary liability, the Manila Principles do provide a framework in terms of what that harmonization should look like. And the principle there is notice and takedown system. Like, users can report to us, law enforcement agencies can report to us, and they have special protocols for doing that. Both in terms, law enforcement agencies can report both content as well as in criminal investigations, basic subscriber information, and this gets reported to all agencies. And then we comply following appropriate due processes. Privacy is another area where harmonization as a principle is a very active principle. The defining governance framework there is a notice and consent architecture. when, when you sign up to service, an internet service, the terms of use in that very clearly lay down the consent provisions. So that is kind of a global norm, if you can say. So I think national legislations, as they're getting written out and built out, these are the kind of principles which they are looking at. In our region, I think the two, in the privacy domain, the two areas which I think has been kind of a benchmark for a lot of countries to look at is the APEC privacy principles. And also, they have looked at the Japan-sponsored DFFT model network, which was a big part of the G20 discussions as well. The data free flow and trust model, which again talks about what are the kinds of national legislations which should be developed, which drive trust in the platforms, but at the same time, laying down appropriate mechanisms for enforcement.
Samir, if you just allow me to just add 2 points to actually respond to Aki, what she mentioned about this privacy policy. You know that a social media platform like Facebook, they have their own privacy policy, which is not
necessarily consistent.
Yes, not fit for Bangladesh, or because they are talking about norms, but you know that there is a global norms what they are following, but we have some of our local norms. So you were talking about regions, religious, and the culture. So you should actually consider all these areas when you are applying your company policy for different countries. So you have to customize your privacy policy, because you know that recently we have experienced a very bad situation in one of our districts. So four person actually died because one person's Facebook ID was hacked, and he actually reported to the police station, but before getting any solution from the police station, that hacker actually posted a fake content on that page and Facebook account, and the mass unrest followed. So we have to consider all these consequences, because you know that if they are not actually considering our local culture and the laws, the peoples are actually losing their lives. So we have to consider
I think that's an important point, Ankit. Let me pose that to you. I think he's raised a very important point.
Yeah.
And we hear this in India as well. We've heard this in Europe and other parts as well, that do your global practices respond to local contexts? Is it contextual, and how are you going to make them contextual is a challenge for you. It's $1 million question for you.
So we recognize this, and I can talk more about the Bhola incident which you mentioned, and sort of we completely aware of that incident, and we worked with your agencies also in terms of curbing the spread of misinformation online. I think there are two aspects. One is that as a country matures in terms of using digital tools, we just need to invest a lot more in terms of education on things like two-factor authentication, and then making sure that we kind of are we are also thinking about this, whether we should make that a mandatory authentication requirement in order to use our service. So that's something which we are thinking about, because that provides an added layer of insulation, and also doing a lot of user education so that know how to keep their accounts secure.
So cyber hygiene.
Cyber hygiene education, that is one. The second point which you talked about on the content moderation side, in terms of catering to local nuances and also cultural sensitivities, which I think is more or less at a fundamental level pretty uniform in the South Asia region, because I think we are, in terms of our cultural norms, there's a lot of similarity in the region as such. We're extremely sensitive to that, which is why we think that this is an area of co-regulation or smart regulation, where, for instance, this is very well established in the UN principles by Frank LaRue, who's sort of the human rights rapporteur there, that if nexus to harm is established clearly by a certain type of speech, it could be hate speech of a certain type, it could be extreme religious speech of a certain type, which borders on hate speech and then leads to, sort of real-world violence. Those kind of material or content will get taken off our platform. So we are extremely cognizant of this. We take this very seriously. We do understand that in terms of local nuance, that has a big role to play in terms of how do we adjust application of our enforcement policies in instances such as the one which you mentioned.
Yeah.
Responding time is very important, you know that.
Correct.
Because when you are talking in front of the public, it can actually spread by 300 people or 500 people. But when you are online and you are
Millions.
boosting that content, because I would like to actually differ with Akidash in some areas, because you know that there is a policy of Facebook that they cannot actually stop or block the account until the boosting is stopped. So I don't know why this is, because you know that when the content is harmful for the society, and it can actually create the unrest in a country. But why they are not stopping that?
So you've
content?
raised two
Yes.
important points, Minister.
And
One
also-
is the technical practice.
Exactly.
Where,
and also in the research and development areas, because you know that worldwide 400 million people speak in Bangla. But when you are talking about this, like identifying the hate speech in Bangla, we have to work together how we can actually develop all this artificial intelligence, how we can actually detect all this hate speech, what are actually in Bangla. So we have that agency in Bangladesh. We have National Telecom
and you have the
Monitoring Center,
size.
but
You have
we-
the size to
yes.
invest in
So
it.
we
So
cannot do it by human beings, but we have to use the AI.
So what we have done is we have set the agenda for the meeting between the two of you. Pretty much respond to the technical question and to the cultural question, and Anki will work with you on that. But you did mention the word artificial intelligence. I will quickly move to Ambassador Gill with that particular segue. So artificial intelligence today, and now let's look at the positive side of technology. I think we are today at the threshold of being able to respond to illness, disease, and health questions like never before. We can respond to some of the most pressing challenges on agriculture and rural sectors like never before. We are on the threshold of changing our quality of life using predictive technologies. You, of course, have a journey of a diplomat who is engaged on technology quite intimately, from the old world technologies of arms control to the new world technologies of digital AI and lethal autonomous weapon systems and more frontier domains. How do you see AI and the future connectivity questions, future access to solutions questions, sitting in Geneva where you do sit, where you're working on this very ambitious project to change the face of healthcare forever?
Thank you very much, Samir. It's an honor to be here, pleasure to be here in Bangladesh. The way I see AI is it's the democratization of expert systems. The previous phase of digitalization was all about ICT tools and also the generation of data that helped us in a very generic way. With AI, we can move to the next stage where what only oil drillers knew or radiologists with 15 years of training knew can be democratized, can be made accessible to larger numbers of people. I also see AI as artisanal. So many people see it as something that only Facebook, Amazon, and Google can practice with their large data sets. I, on the other hand, feel that it is more jugaad, as we say in this part of the world. It's artisanal. It allows a brown-collar worker, a farmer, to also put his or her expertise at the service of solving a problem. What I worry about most, apart from the content-related and the security and privacy-related issues that the previous speakers have referred to, the coming deep fakes, the hacking of your digital avatars, which a surgeon might be using, or hacking of autonomous vehicles and so on, is the divide issue here, the exclusion issue here. If we do not work now on making this accessible to the youth of tomorrow, we could end up creating this divide between problem owners and problem solvers, experts who come and say, let me tell you what to do with your data and what to do with your problems. So this is critical in two areas in particular. One is health, you mentioned that at the outset. The other is finance. So inclusive health and inclusive finance are perhaps the two most transformative areas for the application of data and AI-driven technologies.
And how do you see the governance frameworks emerging? Are countries collaborating on this? Do you see a zero-sum approach where companies and certain geographies are still wanting to make maximum benefit and extract maximum value for themselves? Or are you beginning to see that this is a digital public good in the making, and countries and communities and enterprises are willing to create solutions that are available to everyone to use?
So the picture is mixed. There is some budding collaboration, and in the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation, this is a report, I would commend this to everyone. We took a 360-degree view, looked at experience on the ground in India, China, Africa, elsewhere, and came up with some examples of what we call digital cooperation. This is not about digital technologies alone, it's about the analog world meeting the digital and collaborating around that. But we also saw a lot of areas in which collaboration is woefully inadequate. The content issue, the response time issue, those are a couple of examples. But the key to a future in which everyone can enjoy the fruits of these technologies, to development transformation, not only the leapfrogging types, but the reimagining type of transformation, is getting the governance right. In the SG's panel, we came up with 3 models of governance because there's no silver bullet, and each country, each geography would have to discover governance for itself. But there is a how-to map in the sense of what are the values that a particular society, a particular set of players holds dear. And then what is it that you're using this for? Often we have tech thrown at problems without realizing what the problem needs. So reflection about what is it that we're trying to do, and then eventually collaborating, using the technology as an opportunity, not so much as a tool. And I would like to say that in this region, there is a tremendous opportunity because since the base is very low, there is an absence of everything from trained doctors to trained data scientists. We have an opportunity to get the collaboration right and get the governance right. Just take the marine resources around the Bay of Bengal region. So if we could have 3 governance stacks, if you will, to take a tech term, one around data related to ownership. Fractional ownership can now be counted because of digitalization. So ownership of the negative externalities, who's polluting where, and ownership of the asset creation around the SDG related goals to remove those externalities. And then if we could have another governance pipeline which is related to the opportunity. Data not being hoarded, data not being seen as an extractive layer, and the social and e-commerce layers that we've got used to, but this new emerging layer of
10 stroke.
Bank or a government agency, the question you need to answer is, how do I show that I can be trusted? And of course, there are many ways to do this. One is to simply have a privacy notice in Bangla as well as in English, clearly stating what the data is going to be used for, who it's going to be shared with, how long it's going to be kept. And you also have to inform the data subjects of their rights to access in an electronic format or a portable format, if possible, their rights to have that data corrected or removed, and even the right to file a complaint if one of their rights has been violated. And it's very important to state who that complaint would go to. In other words, does your organization have a data protection officer? And so having many of these elements present would help data subjects make that judgment call, whether or not you can be protected. Now, not many businesses are going to do this voluntarily because there are certain costs involved.
Correct.
And that's where legislation comes in. And it's not too late. For example, Thailand. When I bring up the example of Thailand.
Let me just ask you, I mean,
Sure.
I want to know about Thailand, but let
Okay.
me also problematize what you're just saying by one more additional information point. All trade arrangements, be it regional or larger, like the TPP, original TPP and the new TPP, they all look at data regimes to enable commerce and trade, not necessarily to protect rights and privacy. So now you should give me the Thailand example, but also think about RCEP and others, where what you're just telling us perhaps may have missed their attention of the scripters?
Well, because we've talked about norms, no? And actually there are two sets of norms that we're talking about. One are the social-political norms, which deal with surveillance, human dignity, right? Free will, and the right to privacy. And then there's that second set of norms, the economic and trade norms, which deal with surveillance capitalism and non-tariff trade barriers. And so there are norms factories which are coming out with these. And it would be quite good for Bangladesh to be involved in order to learn from what's happening and not waste resources by reinventing the wheel. Anki talked about two norms factories already. One is APEC, which has something called Cross-Border Privacy Rules, or CBPR. The other one, of course, is the Osaka Track, which was launched by Prime Minister Abe at the G20. And both of these are actually still evolving. Because APEC principles were developed in 2011. CBPR came up at around that time. But even the architects of the CBPR have realized that a 2.0 needs to be developed because there have been advances in GDPR, for example. And I'm sure that your countries would be invited as observers if you would like to. In fact, maybe you may even see an announcement pretty soon from the next APEC meeting that CBPR will be opened up to non-APEC member economies, including Brazil, India, for example. The other norms factory, which is the Osaka Track, as you know, there are 24 countries that have signed this, but there were objections from India and Indonesia and South Africa. And so this has actually now been tied to the WTO. And so I think that it's still in the process of evolving, and definitely if Indo-Pacific community can be represented in that dialogue, then so much the better.
So let me, I'm going to request those who want to come in at this stage and ask questions to walk towards the mic and keep your questions precise and only one, and do introduce yourself. I
Yeah.
can see a gentleman
And
here.
while waiting, you wanted me to tell you
But I
about
want,
Thailand.
but even as you line up, I want you to complete your point.
Country imposing obligations on data controllers and data processors, telling them that they have these obligations to uphold the rights of the data subjects, to implement data protection measures, to report a breach. For example, if the data has been breached, you have a fiduciary responsibility to let the data subjects know that they could possibly harm and give them some advice on what they need to do.
Excellent. So yes, please introduce yourself and pose the question. Can someone turn on the mic, please?
Can you hear me? Yes. So first of all, I'd just like to commend the
Introduce yourself.
I'm Umran Chaudhry. I work in the Amira and Amir Law Associates. I work in the legal sector, and I also study technology law. Firstly, I just quickly commend the success of the Bangladesh Submarine Cable Company, which is now providing bandwidth not just within Bangladesh, but to other countries in the region. I think that's a good example of a digital community. The question is, should we enshrine digital rights in law? Is it, for example, in France, we have the Digital Republic Act, where we have the right to be forgotten, the right to access and rectification, and the rights to self-determination. These rights are being enshrined in law. Should we look at that model, or well, we should be careful not to follow, of course, the Great Firewall of China? That's it.
Yeah, you want to come in? Christoph?
Yes, I'm Chris. I'm Zalewski. I with the Boehm Institute, but
We don't have mics your height.
Oh, sorry.
You'll have to bend a little.
So Krzysztof Zalewski from Poland. I work with the Boehm Institute currently, but I used to work with the Fundamental Rights Agency. And our agency in early 2013-14 has been quite instrumental in drafting also the GDPR. And that here comes my question. Can you evaluate this general data protection regulation in the EU? Is it applicable to the countries in the region? To what extent? And what should we have done differently? And what would you do differently?
So is GDPR compatible to South Asia? Is
Yes.
that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Good afternoon. My name is Sakar Purasaini. I work with an organization called Karkhana. We work on technology education, mostly in Nepal, recently in Bangladesh, and a little bit in India as well. My question sort of builds on what Ambassador Gill said earlier about inclusivity. Recently, when we've been looking at technology education, particularly at very basic levels, we're finding that it's quite easy and there's a lot of will to invest in, say, the infrastructure required to do this better in an inclusive way. But preparing proper technology teachers in the South Asian context is a huge bottleneck, right? So I'm wondering if there have been any frameworks, discussions, any thoughts around how to tackle this challenge, because technology education is like building basic infrastructure. It pays off 10, 15 years from now.
Thank you. I think
Yes,
three,
please.
oh sorry, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Barrister Harun Rashid, DIG, Bangladesh Police. So, what I want to say is, I would like to draw the attention of public policy advisor of Facebook present here. So, first of all, our State Minister of ICT, actually, what he said. First of all, I want to reinforce with him because the Facebook policy, maybe it is global standard policy, but it may not be responsible locally because one always doesn't fit all. So with very specific example, as our minister was telling about the Bola incident. Of course, Bola incident, after the incident, then actually we got the information from Facebook that we asked for, that we requested for. But the other incident, like in Chittagong, where actually we asked for information and the Facebook came up with the question that where's the documents from the court. But for the prevention, of course, we don't have any code document because prevention, we works on the basis of intelligence, advanced intelligence. So in that case, if they ask for code documents or any, legal instruments, then we'll be in trouble. So it is not the country, it's not the region. It depends on the people themselves, actually, their background culture, their, society, social aspects, and also the reality. So if they, if the Facebook, they consider the socio-economic aspect or social aspect here in Bangladesh, if they compare it with any European country or USA, then they will be mistaken. Because, the Facebook, of course, I think Bangladesh is their second largest revenue earning area. So, of course, they should put more emphasis on how to, use the, safe use of Facebook here. So, as because, our security is first. So, that's our concern as a law enforcement practitioner. I express my concern, and of course, request policy advisor, public policy advisor, so that she should take the initiative to customize their policy for Bangladesh. Thank you very much.